unlike the first movie, I think it's a welcome kind of slow, but this one it's just moving quickly. There's always some plot development, and just the way it pushes these characters to their limits, uh, and even builds the developments in ways that we wouldn't even expect after watching part one. Luke, let's start with you. What did you think?
Yeah, it gave me everything I wanted it to, and even then, the changes that were made, I thought they were made for the betterment of the movie, or to make it more compelling, more interesting, and leaves the door plenty open for the third installment. Yeah, as soon as I mentioned, as soon as the first one ended, I went and bought the book and steamed through it, and was like,
Mm.
okay, part two, when is it? And then it got delayed, which I was devastated by. But now that it's great, so Oppenheimer and Dune can split the Oscar wins. Um, so it mostly met. I wouldn't say it overly exceeded, because I had an expectation. Denis had promised us all the fun stuff was to come, and he delivered on that. So I'm glad to say that it delivered as much as I wanted it to.
Yes, this is another one where I had like a kind of a general knowledge of the original story going into Dune. Thankfully, had never been exposed to David Lynch's unfortunate original adaptation of the film, because I heard just universally bad things about that. Not everything I think was his fault, but still. So I kind of knew to avoid that, but I was just intrigued, and I think with 2021 coming off of 2020, it just was something I was ready to experience. Something just this massive spectacle of a story, and it definitely delivered in ways I wasn't expecting. In a way, slower than I expected, but it was something I appreciated. I'm not so I love slow character development and just kind of building up, so that was never an issue for me. But where it ended, I was like, okay, you've given me but a taste of these characters in this world, and I want to learn more. And I think with Dune Part Two, you get that in spades. I would almost argue, not in a negative way, but it almost moves so fast because I wanted time to just kind of like sit in it to an extent in the way we did in the part one, and just sit with the characters and see a little bit more. I don't know if we'll ever get a director's cut of this or some kind of ultimate cut with both, but I definitely think part two, just visually, the character progression, story, and even again what it sets up for Doom Messiah. It gave me chills, and then the score, Hans Zimmer. Yeah, there was a lot watching this that it was such a sensory experience, and it delivered in so many ways. So yes, just initial thoughts. I was just thankful, even though it was a long 3 years of waiting. I was thankful to have finally made it and to be actually experiencing this. That was very, very happy.
Yeah, it was. This is definitely one of those because, like, with a lot of other sequels, it's like, yeah, the movie stands on its own. You could wait much longer for an installment. Like, I don't think we needed um like a. I think there's even less time between the last two Ghostbusters or something. But anyway, like those are ones where it's like, yeah, you could wait a little longer between the installments. This one, when you finish the first Dune, it's very open ended, and you're like, you just want to watch the continuation right away because you're so enamored in the universe that Denis has built. But then it doesn't really give you an ending because it promises that in part two. So you're like, I want the continuation of this right away. And so that's a good kind of wait, in my opinion. And obviously, it was not fun to see it get delayed by like 4 months because of the strike. But I'm so glad that we finally got it. And I drove quite a while to the nearest IMAX because I knew that this was, if any movie in 2024 was worth going to see at IMAX, it would be this. And wow, let me tell you, it was worth it. Like seeing that size of a screen, um, and those visuals, like I said, it feels like it's so meticulous the way he's framed these shots, the distance from the characters. Like in the opening moments, you have like this orange color grading on it, which is so beautiful and almost like hypnotizes you and like sucks you into this first scene with the Imperial soldiers. I forget the Sadark. I don't remember how you say the name. Sadarkins? Is that how you say it?
Sardaukar.
Sardaukars. Okay. what did I say? Anyway, um, but yeah, right away it's just you have Paul trying to like go down the road of his father and learn the Fremen ways and use the desert power to his benefit. And throughout the whole movie, you have this looming threat of this internal threat, which he also addresses. If he goes to the south and he tastes a bit of this messianic power that the Fremen want to feed him, will he ever want to let it go? And that's sort of the pull that Paul has throughout this movie. Is he going to become the Lisan al Gaib? If he does that, will it only be to liberate the Fremen and to stay alive and for justice, or will it ultimately be, it's almost because all the other leaders in this movie, Baron Harkonnen and the Emperor, are obviously greedy and cutthroat and rule with an iron fist. The movie sort of asks, and I love this question: will a taste of that power corrupt all of us? Like who really is the purest? I think Leto was like very much that pure role model to aspire to, and this movie leads us to ask, was Paul ever going to become that? And I think that unfolds very tragically in part two.
Yeah, it goes back to that sort of false messiah sort of thing, like to the conversation that Paul and his mother have about like, yeah, like, but you've planted this story like thousands of years ago, and we're just filling in the blanks, if you will. Like you say, oh, the mother of Lisan al Gaib will survive the poison. He's like, yeah, she's trained to do that. Or like, I will survive the poison too. Yeah, he's trained to do that as well. So it's just that portraying the dangers of religion and just or the false messianic figures that we see and we believe in, and yeah, that's what the whole novel was about. So I'm really glad that Denis was able to give that message in the movie, because that's the main point of it. And if they get that across, they get Dune, they get what it's about, and Messiah will be even greater because of it. So I'm excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, I think Denis also mentioned that when the first book was coming out, people sort of saw Paul as like this fully realized hero, and then that changed after the Messiah book came out. So with that hindsight, Denis managed to write that into Dune Part Two, and to show us Frank Herbert's real intention. I actually have not read the books yet because I didn't want spoilers for when I was watching this movie, and I'm very pleased with that decision actually, because I had my jaw on the floor with some of the suspense in this one. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yes. Oh, yes. I was gonna say, I definitely agree as far as, and I heard some of what Denis actually said, but yes, the idea of weaponizing religion and that conversation that Paul has with his mother in regards to what she sees as hope, and when he screams the fact that that's not hope, and just kind of like laying the foundation for this future to come about. And unfortunately, like you said, this idea of Paul as the hero, but then how the tone shifts very quickly, even the music kind of shifts, and what we see from Paul, that these hints of something else kind of emerging as he steps into this role of the supposed Messiah. We realize very quickly it's not, or slowly but surely we realize that this is not this is not quite who we thought, and what his role will mean, especially in these wars, it's going to be something very different. And I think that in itself, especially for a lot of people who didn't know that, I think it's very unsettling. I think it adds dimension to it, which, like you said, with the original story, I love that, because and not to say that the hero's journey isn't interesting, but it's, to me, I'm always interested more in characters who are flawed and have dimension to them, who have shades of gray. It's not just black and white. And with Paul, we definitely see that there are a lot of shades that have kind of come about as a result of everything that happens in part two. And I can only imagine. I don't know if I'm going to read Messiah beforehand or not, but either way,
I'd recommend it. I'd
I'm
recommend it.
very intrigued though to see how that plays out because I know it's going to be, it's gonna be a mind blower.
Yeah, because when you think about ultimately, first of all, I said earlier that the first one looks like a joke compared to part two, and I only mean that because of just how immense the visuals are and how much they just assault you on the senses. Like you feel how massive this universe is. Like even corners we didn't already see in the first movie, like the Emperor and Princess Irulan's home planet, or let's talk about the Harkonnens in this movie. The Harkonnens' home planet. I think this is about an hour into the movie where we get our introduction to Fade Rotha. Wow, like some of the most. I know it's technically not black and white, but some of the most beautiful black and white in quotations cinematography. Um, Not just that fight, but also you got Leah Seydoux in that scene in the hallway, and he's sort of walking into the fireworks in the darkness, and that's representing like him becoming the foil to um to Paul because she's also testing him to become the Bene Gesserit's form of the Messiah. Um, wow, bro, Fade Rotha in this movie. We could have a whole discussion just about him.
Yeah, so before the movie came, or anything about it came out, I predicted that that would be the opening scene of the movie. The whole
That's what I was
gladiator
thinking
bit. But
too.
obviously, I was
Me
proven
too. Yeah.
wrong there. Uh, but yeah, I don't remember if it's in the book, but the black sun, meaning that everything outside is black and white, and them shooting it in infrared. That was, I don't know, it inspired decision to say the least, and it just added a sort of coldness to that whole planet. And yeah, Austin Butler, he was cast before Elvis had hit screen, so I guess Denis took a gamble on that one. Personally, Barry Keoghan was my pick for Fade Rotha, but Austin Butler showed that
Well, Denis must
he's
have seen
as
him
good
in
as anyone.
Aliens in the Attic and decided, wow, this guy's a no, it's good. But he was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, wasn't he?
Oh
Before
yeah,
this,
Yeah.
it was
Mhm.
Tex.
yeah.
Tex.
It was.
Yeah. Oh my god.
I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business, or whatever that line
No,
was.
it's dumber than that. Yeah. Love that. I forget who it was. A few that mentioned this, but like Austin Butler is so sadistic in this role. Like he has zero semblance in his performance of human empathy, and I think that's exactly what Fade Rotha needed. Like even when Paul is like, "May thy knife chip and shatter," he's saying it as like a respective ritual, and then when Fade Rotha responds with that same line, he's like saying it like this mocking, like false generosity kind of way, like, "Yeah, whatever, your knife will chip and shatter. Nah, I'm gonna win this." Like, and I just love how crazy he was in this. It almost reminded me much better than this, but of like the young President Snow in the recent Hunger Games was like this ambitious young boy who will literally throw anyone in his circle under the bus because he's so hungry for that power and that love of the other Harkonnens in the crowd. And you know, he easily could have become emperor had he survived that and gotten the endorsement of the Bene Gesserit and uh and his uncle, which is kind of freaky.
Yeah, I was gonna say, honestly, the scene with Fade Rotha and Lady Fenring, oh my gosh, that was such a moment for me. It just I was so captivated by that whole experience. And again, this is not taking away from Paul or Chani, but I could have seen more scenes with them. I do know that Lady Fenring technically should have appeared in part one. So it would have been interesting seeing how they would have, I guess, maybe introduced her, and then if they had chosen to go that direction. But yes, just that whole moment and just kind of her in her fearlessness. I mean, partly because of her affiliation, but just how just knowing what we know about Fade Rotha and how she just kind of fearlessly is able to kind of tame the savage beast, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then what that could mean. I just thought that was great. Like that was yeah, I was totally here for all that.
When Charlotte Rampling asked her, like, is the bloodline secure? And she was like, yeah. I was like, oh, of course they had sex after that. Like, this is a movie. Of course, like, they're both hot and young. So, of course, that happened. By the way, Luke,
Right.
how much, since you have a lot more knowledge about this, how much, like, what other roles does Lady Margot play in the book that we may have not seen?
She's in it more, and I think they cut a scene. There was actually quite a few scenes with her and her husband, which I guess Tim Blake Nelson was gonna play him, but
That's who,
they cut
okay.
those out. Yeah, that was gonna be him, and we were gonna probably see Stephen McKinley Henderson again. But that I'm glad they cut that out. It didn't really add much to. Don't think it would have added much to the overall thing. Would have maybe just cut the pacing a bit too long. So yeah, we just would have seen more of her, or yeah.
Yeah, what I heard at one point, which is I didn't know that Stephen McKinley Henderson was cut until I saw the movie, and afterwards I realized where was he? But anyway, I had heard somewhere that it was supposed to be like he had been captured and was being forced to work for the Harkonnens and serve them, and that
Yeah,
was what they
pretty
cut, which
much.
I would have liked to see that. That like even just for a scene, but I agree that we don't really need like Lady Margot's home life or what she's doing if it's not playing into, this like Harkonnens versus Atreides and Fremen conflict that's the center. Another thing I really want to talk about is Paul and Shawnee and their sort of chemistry. Um, First of all, love it. Love everything that Zendaya does. Pretty much, I think that I love like that she's sort of a bit of the voice of well, yeah, she's the voice of reason because she's like they're going a bit too far with his prophecy stuff. Y'all gotta chill out. He's just a dude. Like he hasn't shown y'all any proof that he's the least Al Gaib. You guys are in over your heads. But she also grows to love him as for how he is, not for who everyone else wants him to be. And I think that's kind of beautiful. Also, we talked a bit about Rebecca Ferguson earlier, but man, shout out the how much Lady Jessica has to take on in this movie. But she's always just there's something very reassuring about her, even when she takes a much darker route earlier in the film. I love like even that line that she has between her and Paul where he asks her about the procedure she has to go through, and she's like, "It's lethal for men." There's something so authoritative about her, but in a really comforting way, even when you stop agreeing with what she's doing. So those two leading ladies knocked it out of the park for sure.
More Rebecca Ferguson is better Rebecca Ferguson. Like her Mission
Exactly.
Impossible tenure and wherever else she pops up,
Yes.
and I think we're gonna see a lot more of her
Mm-hmm.
popping up in many
This was like
places.
that's why in Mission Impossible is like one of my favorite female action heroes of that I can think of off the top of my head. So she's always just she adds more layer whenever she's added into something like this. And um yeah, what else do we have to say about Paul and the women who support him in his life?
Well, I guess it's another universe where Timothy Chalamet and Florence Pugh end up together.
Right.
How together they will be, that's a different question. I'll leave that for you guys to see
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
in Messiah and onwards. But yeah, like you guys mentioned, Chani is the moral compass, if you will, of the movie, and I think they add more to her character than was in the book. In the book, towards the end, she's just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, instead of kind of being against the whole thing. She's very much going with him in the book. So I appreciate that change in the movie.
Yeah, and like she's she's very much like you said, like I think she's a lot more her own voice. She's not just complacent. She's not just like his woman. I think she's very much there to be her own character, but
Yeah,
it also makes you think, and I think this was Denis' sort of point. The fact that she is the only one who doesn't bow to him, the fact that she's alone at the end, because she was the only one in this movie that's really pure, is that what leaves her alone in this universe at the end? I think it's heartbreaking. And also I remember when I saw the first movie, I was like, oh, she was in it that little. So the fact that she's basically the second main character right after Timothy was a great change of pace and amount of Zendaya screen time.
Yes, sorry, I'm seeing. Sorry, it looks like it's freezing a little bit, but
Oh,
yeah, I was gonna say though, if there was anything that I was actually sad about is that with the because there's so much more we have to cover in part two. I wanted to see a little bit more progression with Paul and Chinese relationship. I think it felt like it got compressed a little bit, and I wanted to see just a little bit more of just kind of the building blocks of their relationship, especially after the way part one ends. And I feel like because for the sake of time and everything else that has to happen, we didn't get as much of kind of the formation of that relationship between them, even though I know that's technically not as important as everything that comes afterward. But yeah, but as far as what it does represent, especially knowing what Paul's path will eventually where it'll lead, um, and that sense of betrayal that occurs at some point, it's really it's unfortunate. It's kind of it's and I mean, in a way it's surprising, in a way it's not, but either way it's it just reminds you of what Paul is going to have to take on in the future and what Chani will have to take on in the future. And I do appreciate how that played out, as sad as it was to see.
yeah, and let's talk a little bit about that. For some reason, I was almost going to say stadium scene, but whatever you want to call it, that massive sort of courtroom, whatever you want to call it, this meeting between all the different tribes of Fremen, I think is such an important point in the film because not only is it sort of the bridge between Acts 2 and 3, but it's got so much going on. You've got Stilgar encouraging Paul to embrace what he sees as Paul's destiny. Um, and Chani obviously protesting and begging people to just have some common sense or just take a step back from this like fanaticism towards one man, and her yelling his prophecies how they enslave us, and like getting up in that room and then Josh Brolin putting her down, and then Timmy's performance when he steps into that like hypnotic mode where he's after he's drank the blue water and he's suddenly getting a taste of that power and that respect and that platform. And even then you're thinking, oh, maybe he's just doing this to rile up the people because this is what he needs to do to become victorious in this war and eventually stay alive. But you'll almost see it in him that like that he's once he's gotten a taste of it, he almost likes surrounding himself with it, even if it's somewhat out of necessity. And the way the guy after he talks to him, the random guy, I forget if he had a name, he just goes Lisa Al Gaib, and wow, I think that scene was just breathtaking. And again, you feel the scale of that room. I think it was like underneath a big rock. You don't even see the how big it really is. So wow, and like the different shadows on it, I just and obviously when he says that he's the Duke of Arrakis, like I am Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, it's in the trailer. Um,
Mhm.
but that I think is the moment. That's the Oscar clip, you could call it, basically.
Yeah, for me, it's actually the scene right before it, just those few shots of him walking up to the indoor arena, if you will. Dune is very important about capturing the message, but I think it's more important to capture the atmosphere. And I think those shots perfectly capture Paul Atreides as a character. Of course, Denis said that thing that he doesn't really like dialogue in movies. He's more of a visual guy. So combine that with Hans Zimmer going crazy on the electric guitar, and you have my personal favorite sequence in the movie, just that shot of him in the distance, and then a worm comes up behind him. It's just like, what does it add? Is it like necessary to the story? No, but
Oh,
it
I
looks
get what
cool.
you mean. I remember
But
this.
but
Yeah.
it looks cool, and that's all that matters. And so and of course you get
No,
the
it's like
shot
a
of him
very
going
like
through the crowd. Yeah.
it's a very like trippy messianic shot. We didn't even talk about him riding the sandworms. What was your guys' like theatrical experience with the sandworm scene?
Yeah, I am. I am Team Sandworms. I know they're probably in. I guess depending on how you look at it, they might not be as significant a part of the story. But I'm just here for the sand. I really am here for the sandworms. Just anytime they're on the screen, either in part one or part two, I loved it. And then of course when they came, rushing in during battle, it was like you just have those moments in the theater that it kind of takes your breath away. And I think both, really, anytime they're on screen, I was here for it. But Paul kind of coming to his own and having to master riding a sandworm, and even when they show up in battle, yeah, it just there were some moments where it really took your breath away, and it kind of felt like as immersive as cinema can be, I feel like just there are moments, or even the theater experience specifically, there are moments that still kind of take you even further. And I feel like a lot of the moments with the sandworms, and even if we're just talking about those two, those moments got absolutely.
Also, what else? What other team I'm on? I'm very much Team Gurney. Uh, Josh
Mm.
Brolin just um
Yes.
feels like he's very like snarky and witty in these, and it's very funny how much like actors like him and Jason Momoa are able to like flawlessly fit into this world. Um, I was very much convinced that he was gonna die in this movie. I thought for sure Gurney was gonna bite the
Mm.
dust. But good for him for making it through, and I love all of his interactions with Timothy Chalamet. There's that one scene where they're walking through like these like uh caves or whatever, and they have that discussion. And I love this line when Paul says, "All my visions lead to horror," and he says, "Because I lose control," and he says, "No, because I gain it." And so in that way, maybe his visions or his nightmares, Paul's nightmares, did come true. But I love Gurney's part in that, and I love his battle with Dave Bautista. I think Dave Bautista even stepped it up more in this film. Like just his over the top yelling made me laugh so hard, and then how quickly he and Fade Rotha switch roles as soon as you realize how much even more unpredictable Fade Rotha is.
Yeah, I could feel a bit of the Drax coming out when he was yelling. It's like, "Hey, it's Drax
Yeah.
again!" But he got more to do in this one. Um, I hope Denis casts him in Rendezvous with Rama. I think he'd be a fit for that. But yeah, Gurney was great. He was like, "Please nuke the planet, Paul. Please just nuke it." And so I enjoyed that aspect of it. Some people aren't too hot on him, but I really enjoyed Christopher Walken as the Emperor. It was
I thought
not
he
my
was
first
great.
choice. It was not my first choice for that character, but it worked just as much as it needed to. Like this, Muad'Dib, you don't know much about him. That's all you know. Like, he just comes in and schools the Baron. Like, what
What
are you
Dave?
doing here?
Well, is there
Muad'Dib,
anyone you think would have been particularly better in the role? I'm trying to think because
like
I think Christopher Walken's actually really inspired casting. But
my initial thought is like a Mads Mikkelsen, but that's over.
ooh,
He's a little overcast in these villain roles, so I can get someone like
yeah.
Christopher Walken, and that's it. I really like that choice.
And I also think he was given the right amount of screen time because in the first movie you don't see him at all, and I think that was a really wise choice. But you feel his presence because he's sort of the ultimatum is to take out the Emperor because he was obviously aiding in the Harkonnen's genocide on the Atreides. And what I what I like is that we get a good taste of him that we've waited for the second movie, we finally get to experience him, but he's not too overbearing of a presence in the film. That still like most of the action is with the Harkonnen characters and the Fremen and Atreides characters. Um Stellan Skarsgård, for some reason I could not stand it. On like my initial reaction to watching the first movie is like his voice was so annoying. He looked weird. It didn't work for me. That was the one thing about the first movie that didn't work for me. When I saw it the second time, I understood it. I was ready for it, so it worked for me. But I think it very much works here. And that satisfying moment when he's sort of on the floor and he's been beaten down because he's been taunted by his nephew, and then Paul gets his revenge. I mean, that was just so satisfying watching him kill Baron Harkonnen. And were we expecting that twist of of Paul being a Harkonnen? Like, that was wild to me. I did not in my wildest dreams expect that. Looks like I've read the book. I
Yeah.
knew it.
Yeah, I knew it.
Yeah. I will say, from what I remember the book, that I definitely some of the deeper aspects, like I said, that was years ago. But yeah, and I'm kind of glad I wasn't aware of it because it definitely was a shocker, and I think it again, how that plays into Paul's role and how it complicates it even more. I thought that just added, more dimension to it. Yeah, that's not one I necessarily saw coming. If there was a twist, I didn't think it would have been that specifically. So yeah, so just adding to just the complicated nature of what Paul represents in the story and what he is, as this anti-hero, messiah, and everything else, and like what his ascendance will really mean, especially considering what his lineage is.
Yeah, that was
Yeah, it's
another
almost
change
like
from the books that I appreciated. That Paul is the one to kill the bear and not his sister, the talking toddler. So that was a wise decision from Denis to cut that whole bit and leave it for later. And we do get a tease of who's going to be playing Ali, and that's one Anya Taylor-Joy, which is a
Mhm.
pleasant surprise to say the least.
Love that. Which I've always like. I, I was in the back of my head always thinking like we should definitely get like an Anya Taylor-Joy, Florence Pugh co-led film sometimes. Well, this is a start, but wait, I want to clarify. Did you mean like Alia, Alia? Does she kill Baron from the womb, or does she get born in the
No,
book?
no, she's born in the book. In the
Oh,
book is
okay.
like over 4 years, so this is like
Hmm.
a year
It's like over a
ish.
week,
So
or no, not a week, a couple months.
yeah, no, she's
The first
born
Dune is a
in the
week.
book.
This movie is like a month, couple months.
Yeah,
That's funny though. But yeah, so now we should definitely get more into the ending because my jaw was just on the floor from the moment the what's it called, the Paul Fade Rotha fight begins from the very end of the movie. Um, First of all, Fade Rotha meets his maker, which in his last moment he decides to be a little bit humble and give Paul the win. But then, of course, we have the most important thing, which is, I think maybe the part that sticks with me the most is that he goes up to Shawnee and says, "Whatever happens, I will love you as long as I breathe." And then right after that, he he dumps his girl and goes for Princess Irulan to become the emperor. And then he begins this holy war, like he said in the first movie. What like that he was fearing seeing visions of a holy war in his name, and that's exactly what happened. What was our sort of reaction to that shot of those ships going up, and of course of everyone in that room, including the emperor bowing to Paul all of a sudden? Like, what was our reaction to those visuals? Anyone?
I'll let D start off with this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, it was like you. It's like I knew it was coming to an extent, but it just seeing the beginning of this war playing out, and even the conversation um, between Lady Jessica, and of course, Charlotte Rampling as Bene Gesserit leader, my favorite. Even seeing that conversation between them, and them already recognizing, and seeing what is about to play out. It just kind of added to that ominous feeling. Like, I mean, a feeling of excitement in a sense, because we know this is about to really escalate. So there's a sense of excitement, but there's also a sense of dread. It's just like a holy war. And if we look at actual history and what holy wars meant and how those played out, just seeing that, but in this, unique sci-fi, vision of this world, and with the messiahs and with Bene Gesserits, with the Harkonnen, with the Atreides, like all of that, and just knowing what's about to happen with these other civilizations, these worlds, these planets. Yeah, I just thought it was a mixture of emotions. Like it's exciting, it's interesting. I can't wait, but I'm also like, certain this isn't going to play out well in some ways. And what, like I said, this is going to mean for Paul's journey. Something that Lady Jessica and them already recognized, and what that will mean. So, yeah, so I was excited, but I was also very nervous once I realized that was what we were, foreshadowing for the next installment.
Yeah, so Paul's main story is that he's barreling towards a future that he's trying to avoid, but inevitably can't until he embraces it, drinks the water of life and all that. And just seeing that ending play out, I'm like, yeah, this is he's bringing those those Dune Messiah elements into this one, because he has that hindsight. He has the source material to work off of. And I've already had to disappoint a few people with what they think Messiah is going to be. Like, no, that's not what it's going to be. This is not Return of the King if this is the Two Towers. So yeah, it was just like a sort of a horror sight in a way. Like one thing I mentioned. Someone on Twitter mentioned. I was like, oh yeah. So towards the beginning of the film, you see the Fremen collecting all the water from the Harkonnen soldiers and whatnot, and by the end, they're just burning them. So they've completely abandoned all their beliefs in following this Muad'Dib fella, and so they're just gonna follow him and spread the holy war across the known universe and whatnot. So yeah.
Could you remind me, because y'all have seen it twice now. I'm the only one who's seen it once. What exactly was that conversation between Rebecca Ferguson and Charlotte Rampling? I just remember, like, she says you chose the wrong side, and she said there are no sides, but I forget what else there was to
What was
it.
it? I don't
Was there anything
recall.
else important?
It wasn't that important, I don't think.
But definitely,
I remember. I remember. No. I was saying I remember there being a line, if I'm not mistaken, but when she says, basically there are no sides, in a sense she's saying, but basically like this is the future that's before us, and like holy war is, I think she says something like, especially considering this is holy war, sides, basically that's not what we're talking about anymore. Like there is a much bigger situation that's at hand at this moment, and that's from what I remember. But yeah, it was just her hinting at the fact that holy war is now what we're talking about here, and the idea of what sides means, like that doesn't really matter anymore.
yeah, absolutely. I feel like also it's sort of poetic that um Paul like managed to do this because he realized that he's a Harkonnen, and because he has this Bene Gesserit blood in him, like whatever his dad couldn't do because of the Harkonnen inside of him, which is crazy to see him evolve into that. And it's like I'm trying to think, because the Emperor, he's sort of forced into bowing down to him, which is such a wild sight. But he sort of realized that you also have to be feared to lead it like this, and um yeah, this could have like easily been an origin for maybe what Emperor Shaddam had to do in order to go to power. So it's sort of wild to sort of see that cycle. And I think again we end on Chani because, like you said, Villeneuve has that hindsight that Chani was the voice of reason all along, and she's the one who doesn't know her place in this world. She's the one um who can't just stand by it. Who can't stand by all the sides and this cycle that'll keep on going. And now that I'm saying it, it sounds a little similar to Emily Blunt's journey in Sicario. But Yeah,
Hmm.
so I do love that choice of ending it on Johnny, and it kind of keeps going on her, and I was like, wait, no, wait, that's the final shot. Oh, maybe it might be, and then it ended, and I was like, damn, it's. But just her walking and like the ships going over her, I'll never forget. Like
Hmm.
such a like ending it on that high, um,
Yeah.
was the best way they could have ended it.
I was gonna say, I was gonna say what you were saying about Paul, and the fact that he has to be feared. It also is a little bit of a tragic development because he is told basically because and then rewatching of course the first one just kind of highlighted it even more. But the fact that um, you know that the Duke, his outlook as a leader, his outlook as a father, um, was basically his undoing. So the fact that he was all that to Paul, in theory, it should have been, benevolent and like all, that should have been great. But basically, he's told in the second one, like, well, your father was weak, and what happened to him was because he was weak, and he was too afraid to do the thing that he should have, and that's why he ended up in the situation. That's why he ended up where he ended up. And so it being kind of like this 180 where he takes the mantle and is willing to do the opposite. And we are now headed into war because of that. And like you said, I love the contrast of seeing these ships headed out, what is about to, like, this invasion and all these other things that are about to happen. In the meanwhile, like, her story continues, where it began, as in the sand, and with the worms and back, kind of in a sense back where she began. Like, her journey will not, in a sense, at that moment, it's not with Paul anymore.
Yeah, and I kind of predicted that he would side with Princess Irulan because he did mention that that was like a prospective plan of his to propose marriage to one of
Hmm.
to the emperor's daughter in order to stop the holy war, which he continued the holy or the war between the houses from taking down the imperium, which he managed to sort of do by himself and go to war with the imperium. But anyway, it also makes you wonder like how much agency Princess Irulan has in this. Like she's um like either way, is she going to end up having to stand by either Paul or Fade Rotha, one of these uh men who's just been raised into and um and taught to thirst after this power and now given that? Or is Irulan like very much willingly going along with this? Because it seems more like in that moment she's trying to do the best she can to preserve as much as she can, as well as her father's life. Um, so it'll be interesting to see the life that she and Paul lead down the line. That we'll probably see in the next film.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
All right. So, any closing thoughts before we conclude this discussion?
I am not anticipating the wait. It's going to be a little bit of
Mhm.
struggle, but I mean, Doom Messiah is right there, so I may have to just bite the bullet. It's hard because some things I want to say for, the big screen theatrical experience, but I also want to know what happens. So, um, yeah, and then of course there's always possible changes that could happen even with knowing the source material. So there's that. But yeah, I like the fact that just the layers to this story. And again, no, not a knock on Star Wars, but I think given that this kind of laid the foundation for Star Wars to be what it was, I like seeing that the vision for this world, especially given the author's initial vision, that it's something that is distinctive, that is like I said, layered and uh just provides us something different. I understand we've seen sci-fi, we've seen aspects of these stories and these characters in theory before, but I don't know, it feels fresh, it feels new, and there's just the fact that it gives you such anticipation and excitement for something that technically at least is not, a pre-existing franchise, isn't a sequel, isn't a remake, so to speak, in that sense. It's something that excites me. So I hope that it gives, I don't know if it will, but hopefully it gives more directors motivation, to take on, projects like this, even if we're talking about from a literary standpoint. There are so many, interesting, and I say that as a huge rigger, so there's that. But there are so many stories, so many universes, so many worlds to explore, in ways that aren't just attached to pre-existing IPs or films we've already seen before. So I'm excited, hopefully, for what this could mean going forward. I hope it's just added motivation, industry wise.
Yeah, I think my favorite part of this movie is everyone realizing that their favorite thing is probably inspired by Dune. Um, like your Star Wars, like your even something like Eren Yeager, I think is very similar to Paul Atreides from Attack on Titan. And lots of people are going and picking up the book, which is always a great thing, just getting more people reading. As for the next installment, I'm guessing it won't be his next movie. Whatever he makes, of course, I'm sure we all will be there opening day, whether it's Rendezvous with Rama or it's a Cleopatra movie with Zendaya. I think Denis with this has cemented himself like up there with Nolan as
I
like
forgot that.
the guy working today. I don't think there's anyone on those two guys level, as at least someone doing it as consistently up there in quality. I think this has raised the bar, not for just for science fiction filmmaking, just for filmmaking in general. It costs less than 200 million. You see Marvel movies these days
Yes.
cost like 300 million. They look nothing compared to this. So I think it's a lesson for everyone in Hollywood, and just give Denis all the sci-fi books that he can do.
Yeah, so this one costs less than 200 million, and the creator I think costs less than 100 million, and the fact that they both look more impressive and immersive than something like Quantumania or The Flash that costs
Ugh.
this massive amount of money. I think they got to change up the approach, for sure. But man, I think like you made the Nolan comparison. Both this and Oppenheimer are like those rare films that like just attract the wide audiences because they're a must in these premium formats. They're a must on the massive screen. And I love that this one's making a lot more money now that there isn't a simultaneous HBO Max release or as looming of a pandemic impact, and that this is one of the films that people are like, yeah, the first one was amazing. We got to see what happens next, and it has to be seen in a theater. Which before the first movie came out, even with the previous film adaptations and TV adaptations, the this may have been more seen as a bit of like a niche approach, especially since I know Blade Runner didn't do as well at the box office. But I'm so glad that like even the wide audience and younger audiences are now so interested in this story and seeing it in all its visual beauty. And I just think this is one of those unique blockbuster experiences that we'll cherish for years and years to come. Like I know a lot of Lord of the Rings comparisons are made, and I think it's justified. I think it's very much justified because they're both with such immense and rewarding world building, and they're just a cathartic, big experience. All these characters and elements at play that make you feel like you're seeing something massive and grand that just sticks with you and makes you want to dig into all these corners. All right, so that concludes a great discussion about what will definitely continue to be the hottest film of the year for a long time, I will imagine. So Luke, I'd like you to plug your social media and so on for the people watching and listening. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram, but hopefully mainly on YouTube at Look Reviews space or underscore. You can watch my top 10 movies of last year video. I do have an idea about making one on Arrival and why it is his best movie, which we all agree. So therefore, it is the correct
I think
answer.
we'd all watch that. Go for it,
I
man.
check that out.
We'd all
I
watch
need to
that
I
right
need to
away.
rewatch it and gather my thoughts once more.
Yes.
All right, D, where can we find you on the gram, YouTube, etc.? Everything you want to plug?
Yes. Hey everyone, this is the Movie Man, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. If you're not familiar with that, that is my general tagline for all my videos on my channel, and that kind of sums up what I do. I love talking about films. I delve into the occasional television show, and occasionally I do trailer reactions as well. And I just enjoy, getting into film from a personal perspective, understanding beyond just mere entertainment. Film has impacted my life in a lot of very significant ways. So there always is a little bit of personal perspective in what I have to say. You can find me on Instagram and Letterboxd at no spaces, no caps, DMOVIEMAN, D Movie Man. You can find me on Twitter at DMovieMan2, and you can especially find me right here on YouTube at capital D capital MOVIEMAN. I recently did a review for the American Society of Magical Negroes, which I had some feelings about. I recently got the chance to go to Sundance for the very first time in person, so
Nice.
I'll be having a little bit of a rollout for the multitude of films I've seen. It's going to be plenty of reviews I have to churn out as a result of that. But I'm excited to share my thoughts on those films, especially as they continue to be released throughout the year. So yes, please feel free to check me out, and I would love to have you.
And thanks again, you guys, for tuning in. As always, last thing I'd like you to do is drop your Denis ranking and your overall thoughts on Dune 2. Who was your favorite performance in the film, and what were you most blown away or surprised by in the film? And yeah, thanks again. Always tune in for more at Feature Fanatics with more amazing topics and guests.